welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I joining each other via Skype, and we are going to talk some free agency as the conference finals are well underway. Both series sit at 2-1. We figured that we would start focusing on the free agent pool, as there are 27 other teams, with an extra team about to be thrown into the mix here soon. I think the expansion draft will start to take is definitely in the back of many people's minds as they decide what to do with this offseason. And in today's show, we specifically want to focus on the goaltenders, because there is a gluttony of goaltenders available, whether it via RFA, UFA, or guys who just don't seem to fit their team's plans anymore. There just seems to be a lot of goaltenders available, and Justin has taken it upon himself to create quite the spreadsheet. So this is Justin's baby. So I'm turning it over to you, Justin.
Wow, that's so gracious of you, Mark. The free agent goaltending market is going to be quite exciting for me personally. Just, obviously anybody who's listened to the show knows that I play goal. I'm a goaltender at heart. And so, for me, basically all I did is I ran through each team individually, looked at their cap space, looked at their, I guess you want to call it maybe their top 3 or 4 goaltenders, and really took a dive into who I think might stay, might go, might get traded, and where guys might sign. And, again, the big thing I took into account was, what teams are looking for specifically, whether that's, maybe a veteran backup, a 1B, or maybe necessarily they're looking for a starter, and, what their future holds. Because, again, a lot of these teams have to take into account, like you said, Seattle coming in. And so, if they go in and spend a lot of money on 2 guys, or, waste, valuable assets like draft picks, they could end up losing that guy to Seattle come, the expansion draft.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely has to be something that's on these teams' minds.
Yeah. So with that said, I don't know where you're at with your list, but, jump in. I figured I'd just go through the teams alphabetically, keep it simple, keep it easy.
All right.
And we could roll through and, see what you got, just jump in anytime. But so with that said, first, starting with the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, I think this one was, one of the easier ones. Obviously, they've got Gibson locked up at 6 more years, I believe, for $6.4 million. The only real question mark is Ryan Miller, whether he's going to retire or continue to play. I firmly believe he will continue to play. And, Anaheim obviously does not have much cap room at all right now at the moment.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, it really is. You consider, like, for a team that didn't finish that high, right, a majority of the time either they've taken on contracts that, are going to be put on, LTIR, or, they got a lot of guys that are about to hit the market, so cap space will open up. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. They'll end up. No, go ahead.
I would say that Ryan Kessler probably not going to play again, is my guess. So they at least have his financials available. But yeah, it really is. You look at this team and you go, wow, how is this team so up against it? Like, they have $470,000 in cap space. And they only have crazy. One player making over $7 million, and that's Ryan Getzlaf. And that's only for one more year. This team's about to go into a huge overhaul, because at the end of this year, they've got almost $30 million in cap space. And a lot of you've got Getzlaf, Backus, Carter Rowney, Eric Branson, all UFAs, and this team will really start to change. And I'd say that out of any of the teams that need a backup goaltender, this is probably the least consequential, because they are just going to be bad. I can't see Ryan Getzlaf not wanting to be moved, right?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I do think this is the time to move him if you're going to. And, you say, hey, look, you've been great for our franchise. You've done a lot of great things. You brought us a cup, but, at this point we're in rebuild. And
they could eat half that. No problem. Yeah. It wouldn't be a big deal for them to eat $3 or $4 million of that 8.25. And then when it comes to the goaltending, there's just not, it doesn't really matter who they decide to slot in there, because this team's just going to be bad. It might actually be to their advantage to they do have Anthony Stolarz in the minors, and he's always an okay option to bring in.
Yeah. And honestly, that's where it is. I think if Ryan Miller wants to stay, they're going to give him another 1-year deal and let him keep playing. Because again,
why not?
They don't need to go out and get anything else really. So
it's going to be a matter of. I think that Ryan Miller's a guy we got to keep in the back of our minds, because I think when Ryan Miller signed in Anaheim, they were a good team. And I think the thought was, hey, like, I might be able to win another Stanley Cup with this team, and that is definitely not going to happen anymore. That's why I don't see him signing there. I think if he's going to stay in the league, why not, and be a backup? Why not be a backup for a halfway decent team? Especially since you're only going to make $1 or $2 million anyways, right?
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And so
go back to Buffalo.
I think they're just as far off, to be quite honest, but. That's just my opinion. So at least they got a superstar there.
It's true. So Arizona?
Yeah, Arizona, same situation, right? They're pretty locked up at goal. They've got Kemper for 2 more years, Ranta for another year, and Aiden Hill in the minors. He's an RFA. I think, again, he'll re-sign with them. There's no reason why they would let him go. He was decent, the times that he had to come up and play backup. But because, again, you got 2 guys, Kemper and Ranta, that, don't necessarily ever really make it through a full season without having little bumps or stretches of injuries. And so,
I don't think they'll do anything. They're not going to touch that.
Yeah, and I think Ranta is a guy that, again, if they don't look to be a playoff team or they don't look like a shot at, making the bubble, they'll probably move Ranta at the deadline to maybe get a, 3rd or 4th rounder. But other than that, they're really not going to do much.
Okay. The Boston Bruins are interesting because both Halak and Rask are UFAs at the end of next season. Yeah.
This one will be puzzling because obviously there's kind of a shaken relationship between not necessarily management and Rask, but I'd say the Boston city and fans itself and Rask, where, some people, like, I see both sides of the spectrum where some guys are like, this guy's great, but then other people, fans, are like, get rid of this guy. He abandoned us during the bubble. He, can't ever win a Game 7, so why bother? Let's move on, trade him and get something. So this will be very, very interesting. I think, obviously, that Boston will probably stick with, Rask and Halak, but, who knows?
Yeah, from a logical standpoint, it would be dumb to move on. You're not going to get anything close to value. You might get a first. I don't think anyone's given a first round pick for 34. What will be 34-year-old Rask at $7 million. Even if the Bruins were to eat $3.5 million of that contract, I don't know why a team would be willing to give up that much. If you're, who are the possible teams who would be interested in a UFA goaltender? I think this conversation kind of goes along with the Leafs talking about trading Anderson, where you maybe only have a guy for 1 more year, right? So between those 2 guys, if you threw Rask into the mix, who's interested? It's the Oilers, the Flames, maybe the Islanders. All teams in need of maybe a goaltender, but I don't know who. Really, the Flames and the Oilers. Those are the 2 teams that pop out to me. Are there any other teams that pop out to you that you're like, yes, they might be interested in a UFA goaltender?
Yeah, I would say you could definitely throw Minnesota's name in that hat. I know they're probably looking to separate themselves from Devin Dubnyk at this point and kind of start fresh, get something else, and move on. Another team maybe you could look at would be Colorado. I'm not sure, how much longer you want to go with the pair of Grubauer and Francouz. And, obviously it was okay, but,
it's definitely not winning them any series.
Right.
But at the same time, neither is Frederik Andersen. So that's the problem, is the Leafs are going to try to move this guy. And the reason they want to move him is because he hasn't won and hasn't stolen a playoff series. So that's not a bargaining chip. right, exactly. Yeah, I see Rask coming back with the Bruins, and maybe mostly because you look at Halak and you wonder how much does this guy have left. You definitely don't want him to be your starting goaltender. You don't want him to play 60 games for you. So a Rask will be back, and we'll see what happens there. But I expect for the Bruins to begin taking some steps back. But
yeah, and I do think Halak will end up signing an extension with this team too. I think, he's been a great 1B goaltender, and I think they'd like to just continue that relationship as well.
And maybe Rask just sticks around anyways. I mean, I don't think you're really that mad that he left the bubble. Like, if the guy's having some, like, yeah, okay, you can see it from he abandoned them in the bubble, but like, yeah, he comes out and he says, my family's more important. Well, maybe he's actually saying, I'm horribly depressed in here and I need to get out or it's going to be bad. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm not going to try and judge. I mean, sure, from a fan's perspective, I understand it. It'd be annoying. Like, they might have been able to win another round had he stayed. I mean, he is better than Halak for sure. But that's we'll never know, and you'd rather have him as your starting goalie than Halak, in my opinion. There, so for a full stretch of the regular season. Let's go to the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah,
next in alphabetical order.
They've got roughly $33 million to spend, but they've got about 20 forwards they need to sign up front. So
yes, they currently have 4 forwards signed through this season, and then 3 signed after that. Marcus Johansson only has 1 year left on his deal, and unfortunately, one of those players is Kyle Okposo.
Yes, unfortunately, and from what I keep hearing too, they're going to try to work with a salary of roughly $70 million-ish for the season, so they're not going to try to extend themselves to the cap limit if all things are correct. But when you look at this goaltending situation, obviously you've got Hutton there for another year at relatively good money. Allmark's an RFA. I think he re-signs. He was pretty decent in the short stints we did see him for, the 20-ish games. And then they've got Luukkonen in the minors, who's still got a couple years left on his deal. But to be quite honest, I know this is a Buffalo team that could desperately use a big name starter, to help kind of maybe reignite that rebuild that they've been trying to do for so long, it seems like. But honestly, I don't think free agents are going to want to go there right now at this point, because again, they've got so many unknowns up front at the forward position. And then honestly, if they're smart, they're not going to, get rid of assets right now at this point to try to bring in a big name goaltender. So to me, this is a team that is just going to have to deal with another year of mediocre goaltending.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the question is going to be who is going to want to go play there. I guess I could see them targeting a guy like Jacob Markstrom, but I don't know if he would have any interest in going there. Thomas Greiss sounds to me like a Buffalo kind of. I could see him signing in Buffalo. Who maybe like a Brian Elliott. Like you're probably at this point still thinking that Carter Hutton is your goalie. I mean, he wasn't really good. He hasn't been good for the Sabres. I mean, he really had his one good little year with the Blues. But I guess I figure they're going to go after somebody, but probably somebody who they can get at 2 or 3 years worth. Like, they're going to get somebody in this free agency who can overlap Carter Hutton leaving. I don't think that Carter Hutton is necessarily terrible. I don't think that the Sabres have been very good at all. So it really hasn't been his fault. But
no, apparently too, I did read there were some issues with his vision he was having early on for most of the season, and I guess that's been corrected, and he's starting to see the puck. His vision's a lot better with the puck now, which could explain some of the bad numbers he's had this season. But to be quite honest, if I'm Buffalo, I'm going to wait a year and maybe go after a guy like Jake Allen, for example, who you can get, relatively inexpensive, to a contract there. And, you don't have to go out and give up anything to get him.
Yeah. Why not bring in like Jimmy Howard?
Sure. Yeah. There's a 1 year deal.
I mean, hey, he went 2-23. He can't get worse, right?
Right.
He only won one more game than the Zamboni driver guy, right? The difference is he had 25 tries.
That's true.
That's insane. His record this season is actually insane. Like, how often do you see a goalie play 27 games and have over a 4-point goals against average?
I don't think that's ever
and
been a
only
thing.
win 2 of those games. Like, that is horrendous. I mean, those are some like expansion team type numbers. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I think, the Sabres, I would think, are going to go and try to make a splash in this spot. I know they have an internal cap, but that still leaves them with $22 million to play with. And yes, they have to re-sign some forwards. They're going to have to re-sign Sam Reinhart, which will probably cost them a decent amount, $5 million, something like that. And of course, we'll go over all this later as we go through the rest of the team's other positions. But I think they're going to be in an okay spot where they're going to bring back some of these forwards and they'll be able to fill out the rest of their lineup. But I guess the big thing is, what is Rasmus Dahlin going to sign an extension to? And then that'll everything else will fall into place from there.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, let's go to what's the next in the alphabetical order? The Calgary Flames.
Calgary, yes, sir. So this is an interesting team because I think this is going to be the first big team we talk about that's going to make some moves, right? We know they would love to get their hands on a top-notch starter. They've got a little over $16 million in cap space to work with. You keep hearing rumblings of, maybe Sean Monahan or Johnny Gaudreau might be in or out. But when you look at the back end, they've got Rittich for another year at a little under $3 million. Cam Talbot's a UFA. I do not think he re-signs. I think he's looking for something a little bit more long-term. He's shown again that he has the potential to be a number one goaltender. Not that, if I'm a team like,
kind of like
Colorado,
a 1B type of goalie.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
He maybe is a Greiss in the right situation, a Greiss or a Khudobin or like somebody that can play, but is definitely the next slot down. The problem is he's played on these teams that are not the best defensively, so his numbers don't necessarily reflect the same way that Khudobin. Like if Cam Talbot went and played in Dallas, his numbers would be much better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just based on the team in front of him.
Yeah, and after looking at the situation, honestly, I looked at Cam Talbot where I think he's going to end up, and it's not going to be a good defensive team. I think he ends up in a place like Detroit that might be willing to give him a little bit more term than most of these other teams will. But ultimately, though, I think Calgary makes a splash, and they go out and they trade for Matt Murray in Pittsburgh.
Okay, Matt Murray in Pittsburgh. I did hear that the Oilers had talked to the Penguins, and they came back. Colin essentially said, "Yeah, it's what they're wanting is too rich for our blood." Yeah, so that means they want more than a first-round pick for Matt Murray.
Yeah, I do hear that, and I think Calgary would be willing to move a first-round pick because they're kind of in that spot where they're not necessarily in a rebuild yet. But they're closer, or at least I think internally they feel like they're closer to competing for a championship. And especially when you've got Giordano here for 2 more years, I think you kind of want to take advantage of that. If you're Calgary, they've got, some decent pieces on the back end. But
would you rather have, let's say, Frederik Andersen, and with the let's say you can trade for Andersen and you can sign him to an extension. Let's assume that he'll want to sign an extension. So let's say you trade for Frederik Andersen and the cost is slightly less, is my guess, for Andersen over Matt Murray, and you can get him in there. Would you rather have Murray or Frederik Andersen as your goalie for the next 3 years?
Well, I won't disagree with you. I think Andersen is probably the guy I would rather have. However, the concern for me as a Calgary GM would be that extension, right? Because if you trade for Andersen,
well, you could you could have an extension agreed upon before you deal with it, right?
No, absolutely. But I mean, to be quite honest, it's very rare that does occur. And I think as an RFA, Matt Murray is obviously somebody you're going to be able to keep around for at least a couple years. And I think right now Matt Murray is probably looking for a spot where he knows he can be a number one. And while I think Edmonton maybe,
well, he doesn't have a choice.
Right. Well,
Matt Murray doesn't have a choice where he goes. If Pittsburgh trades him, he has no leverage at all.
No, absolutely. That's absolutely correct. So, but just I actually had another little nice spot for Anderson to go to with a team that I think can maybe offer something more than just different from a first rounder, I guess, which I think Toronto might be a little bit more receptive to. So,
okay,
we'll get to that a little later.
All right. The Flames definitely have lots of opportunity here. They will be one of the teams that do something pretty interesting. Let's go Carolina Hurricanes. They've got two goalies still locked up, Reimer and Mrazek, but both with 1 year left on their deal, and it is rumored that they've been talking to some teams about goalies, as I don't think that these guys are their long-term solution. I don't know if they want to bring Mrazek back for 5 more years.
Well, I do think Mrazek is a guy that they would like to bring back because he's been pretty good for them when healthy. But I think it's more going to be a situation of
will he sign for basically the same deal again, like around $3 or $4 million? That would be the question.
Yes, I do think they would prefer to have him be like a 1B, 1A combo type thing. And so, you're going to have to go. And again, this is another spot where maybe Jake Allen could fit in quite nicely. Because let's face it, I think, Montreal, as much as, I respect Marc Bergevin as a GM, I don't think you bring on Jake Allen to be your backup all year because you don't want to spend that kind of money on the goaltending position. So I still think Jake Allen's going to move at some point this season. Carolina could be a nice spot for him because, again, if you can get Mrazek and Allen locked up at a long-term deal, I would feel very comfortable at getting both those guys signed at under $4 million, under $4 million, hopefully a piece long-term, maybe 3 to 5 years. And I'd feel very comfortable going forward with that if I'm Carolina.
I think, but Jake Allen is not going to be an option until much later in the season, where Montreal's decided that they're out of it. I mean, they want they want the luxury of being able to play Carey Price 50 games. I think that's the goal. Like maybe even less, maybe 45 games for Price, and 37 for Allen. If we're in a perfect world, I think that would be great. And then, of course, they make the playoffs, and you've got a fresh Carey Price going in. I think they're understanding that Carey Price can no longer play 60, 65 games and have a productive postseason.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think, again, when you look at Carolina, maybe you flip an asset because, again, I know Jake Allen's not going to re-sign in Montreal just because I think he's going to want around $4 million. And if you're Montreal, you're not giving him an extension at that price. And so if you look at a guy like, for instance, James Reimer, who is still very capable of playing 25, 30 games as a backup, you can maybe swap those assets and throw other things in there. And you can move Reimer to Montreal, who could play, some good games for Montreal as a backup there.
Yeah, very true. Okay, let's go to the Chicago Blackhawks. They have been rumored to have offered Corey Crawford a 1-year deal. We don't know the amount, but it is a 1-year deal. So the ball is in his court. Malcolm Subban is an RFA. And then you, of course, have Colin Delia, who played 16 games in the regular season. Didn't look that good. He's got 2 years left at $1 million. What do the Chicago Blackhawks do?
Yeah, I think this is another team that would love to get their hands on a starter. I know they've been rumored to be interested in Robin Lehner's services again. I don't think they'll get it. But
I think we can assume that Robin Lehner's going to re-sign in Vegas.
Yes. Absolutely. Obviously, anybody on Twitter has been following the 5-5 deal he essentially is reported to have gotten. Of course, Robin Lehner denies this. He's like, let's focus on hockey. But, of course, where there's smoke, there's usually fire. And to me, this looks pretty true. If, maybe the numbers might be off a little bit. But, I do think there is already a deal in place if I'm Vegas. But from a Chicago standpoint, I think Malcolm Subban, he's gone. Even though he's an RFA, I don't think they qualify him. I think they let him walk because he's been horrendous. Hasn't looked good in Chicago, didn't look good in Vegas. Boston, he really hasn't looked good anywhere, in my opinion, he's been. And so not worth putting the money, towards. So you get rid of him and you try to go find a backup because I do think Corey Crawford will re-sign with this team. He's still a very capable goaltender, maybe not your 60-game starter anymore, but, if you get him 25, 30 games, as long as he's healthy, he's very capable of being a quality 1B for you. And ultimately, I actually had Jake Allen getting traded to Chicago and being the goaltender.
You got Jake Allen being traded to like 4 teams.
Well, I do think that next season when he becomes a free agent, I think this is where he re-signs. In my opinion, I think this is going to be the best opportunity for him to be a potential number one moving forward. I know he would like to do that because, he's come out and said that he's, adapted to the role of being a backup and he's enjoyed it. But when you're a goaltender, listen, you don't want to be a backup your whole career. You know that, obviously there's some guys that just aren't good enough and they accept that role and they're okay with that because they still get to play in the NHL. But there's guys like Jake Allen, I think, who were a starter. They had that taste. They're still capable of being that good. They're just not going to sit back and take backup roles for the rest of their career. They're going to go seek some starter positions. And I think this might be the best place for him to sign after this next season.
Yeah. One guy that I would look, if you're Chicago and you're willing to bring back the old Corey Crawford, why not go out and bring in Craig Anderson and just have that veteran pair of goaltenders, because he'll be available. He'll likely come reasonably cheap. And I think he would fit your system really well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I did look at Anderson, and I also looked at Jimmy Howard. Might be a good fit here too on a 1-year deal to come in and give you some games as well. But I think if you're Chicago, I would probably at this point rather put my money on Anderson rather than Howard at this point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think Craig Anderson's much better goal. I wonder if Jimmy Howard isn't done. Like, he might get an opportunity to be a team's, he's going to have to sign league minimum. Absolutely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
He's not even worth $1 million. Unfortunately,
yeah,
he's a great guy, but he's clearly not a good goalie at all. He's been quite terrible.
And I do think right now at this point in his career, it's probably a 60% chance, in my opinion, that he's going to retire before he re-signs anywhere else.
I think so too. Especially based on all these other goaltenders that are available. Who, if you pull up free agent goaltenders, there probably is. There's 33 goalies that are free agents coming into this offseason. And looking at this list, I think there's probably one guy that I would want less than Jimmy Howard. No, I lied. None guys. There's none guys. No, I don't think there's anybody that I'd want less than Jimmy Howard. Jimmy Howard just is not. He's not cutting it anymore. Unfortunately, he had a nice career, but I just don't think that he's even NHL material. I mean, if he's willing to sign a 2-way deal and play in the AHL and be my third goaltender, I would take him. That's about the only way I'd take him.
Yeah, and I don't think he's riding the buses anymore. So
no, the Colorado Avalanche, team that lost likely because of their goaltending, Grubauer and Pavel Francouz, and then of course Michael Hutchinson. He had to come in because both those guys got hurt. So what does this team do? I mean, you're not necessarily planning on having to use your third goalie in the playoffs, so I don't think that's something that you're really that worried about. But in my mind, neither Francouz or Grubauer have been really good for this team. They've been fine. They've been good enough. Grubauer was pretty good in the playoffs, but some of those numbers are from those 4 exhibition games in the beginning, or I guess he played in 3 of them. So they kind of padded his stats a little bit. The teams weren't that great in those moments, but I'm wondering, are they going to give this guy an extension, or is this kind of, what do you think the Avalanche are going to do?
Yeah, you know what? I think while this team would love to go out and get themselves a number 1A type goaltender, I ultimately don't think that happens. While they've got, $22-ish million in cap space, I think their bigger concern is a little bit further down the road with the defense and the forward position. And what I mean by that is obviously you've got a guy like Landeskog who needs a new contract extension.
Zadorov needs a new contract extension too.
Yeah. You got to think maybe a couple of years down the road, even further, with Kadri and McKinnon are going to need extensions, which I think, if you're Colorado, obviously you want both those guys sticking around for a while. But to me, the other concern is too, you've got, Makar, who's going to need an extension. And then you've also got to go out and find, I think, at least one more top 4, top 5 type shutdown defenseman to add to that roster. And I think ultimately they're going to spend their money elsewhere Maybe they'll look to sign Grubauer to an extension because, again, if you can keep him around the $3 million-ish that he's at right now, I'm totally comfortable with him being a 1A, 1B combo type guy at that money. But
who's going to be your 1B? Do you want Francouz as your B?
No, I don't. And honestly, I think while he was great this season for the team when they needed him to be, I don't think that's a long-term solution, especially at 30 years old. So, maybe he gets moved this season. Maybe they go look into the free agency next year and see if they, find a guy maybe they like. But I think Grubauer maybe
Ryan Miller could be a great fit in Colorado. For real. He could be a great fit. I mean, you bring in the veteran goaltender, you got him alongside Philip Grubauer, and I mean, he only played in 23 games this last year, but maybe if you think he can play more, either him or Craig Anderson would be really nice fits. I think this team needs a veteran goaltender, like a guy who you can has won something in his career. Like they've both won playoff series, and they could both step in. If Grubauer goes down, they could both step in, and you can feel okay about who you have back there.
Yeah, I think maybe one team to keep an eye on. I think they're going to be competing for a playoff spot, but say maybe, they've got a three-headed monster right now, but maybe you look at the Rangers and ask Lundqvist, hey, we've got a legit shot at competing, and maybe, if you're the Rangers, you're a little out of it, maybe sitting at that 9-10 spot, come close to the deadline, you say, hey, let's get, Lundqvist in here to play some minutes for us.
Oh, I think Lundqvist is gone.
Okay.
I actually don't even know if he's going to play.
Wow.
I really don't. I think there's a chance that he retires. I know that. Okay. I believe it was the New York Post. He said that he is coming back to New York City to start school for his kids, and then we'll go from there, is what he said. So he doesn't sound like a man who's super sure that he's going to come back and play this next year.
To me,
or that he's going to play for the Rangers.
Sure, yeah, and that's exactly where I'm thinking, because I think, again, he kind of realizes his future could be up in the air with New York, and they might ask him to leave because, they've got Georgiev and Shesterkin, and, do you want to have to get rid of Georgiev to keep Lundqvist around for maybe 1 or 2 years at the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lundqvist needs to be gone. That's
okay.
Yeah, but Colorado would be a great spot for him.
Yeah.
But I guess in my mind, you wonder, was he more or less was the like 2A, 2B guy. So if you're Colorado, do you really want to bring in a 2A, 2B guy?
Sure.
When there's maybe some other options. Although who would you rather have, Lundqvist or like one of those other Miller or Anderson? I think you'll take the flyer on Lundqvist to see if maybe a shakeup kind of gives him some new life. Although I feel like he's had that a couple times where it's like, oh, he's down and then new life for Lundqvist, and then he's down again, new life for Lundqvist. So, but it might have something to do with the team in front of him too. Okay, let's go to the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yes, this is obviously an easy one. They're going to stick with Merzlikins and Korpisalo, and I'm actually excited for this year for their goaltending because both guys at 2-year deals. Merlikins obviously making about $1.5 million more, but it's going to be a battle to who's going to go out and take that number one spot, because ultimately I think after the season, who's ever shown that they're the guy, they're going to be the go-to guy, I think is going to get the extension, and the other one might be looking at a little trade bait. So it'll be fun. But I think, if you're Columbus too, I think another option to look at is maybe bringing in, I don't want to necessarily say a veteran guy, but I think they would like to bring in a guy. No, well, I was going to say maybe maybe like an Aaron Dell, a Louis Domingue, a guy who's been there before, who's been around for a while, but isn't going to be your number 1 or 2 goaltender and is okay with being that third string, but who I feel okay with if, there's an injury situation, who can come and play backup minutes.
Yeah, that's true. And I think they're an easy one. They're going to stick with what they have because both those guys played really well in the playoffs. So I don't think you have much of an issue there. Let's go to the Dallas Stars, who are losing one of the heads of their their two-headed monster, Anton Khudobin, is a UFA, and I think there is a small chance he re-signs in Dallas, but my guess is that he wants to have a crack at being a starting goaltender, and he's going to get it somewhere.
Yeah, so I took a look at this. Obviously, Ottinger coming in, he's played very few minutes, but he's looked pretty good, very calm, very, he's got that veteran goaltender presence about him, and I think if you're Dallas, you feel very good about that.
And you can always go sign. You can sign any number of these older guys and bring them in as a backup. But you're the thing about Ben Bishop, we know he's not a guy who's going to play more than 45 games.
Right. Yeah.
He's just not.
I think it's Ottinger's time. I think it's time for him to come up and crack his teeth at the NHL level and maybe get 30 games in here and see what you can get and ultimately what you have, because he's 2 years out from being an RFA. So this is the time to figure out, are we going to go with this guy for the future, or when Ben Bishop's contract is up, do we need to have another plan B in place because Ottinger's not going to be that guy. So.
Yeah, he played well in the AHL this year, and yeah, we'll see if he can make any kind of difference there. I think you're definitely bringing some other goaltender into your system. It just depends on maybe who that ends up being, but
I think ultimately though, Khudobin resigns or doesn't resign, ends up going, and you're going to love the team I picked for him. The Washington Capitals is where I think he signs.
Oh, he's going to replace Braden Holtby there, huh?
Yes,
I think be the backup to Samsonov. See, that'd be my pushback. Is that I don't know if he's going to go somewhere where he's still in a position where he'll probably be a 1A 1B, or maybe he knows he's comfortable with that. I don't know, but
yeah, I think there's going to be that rush connection, right? I think Kovalchuk might re-sign there in a 1-year deal. I think you still got Ovi, Kuznetsov, they're in that Samsonov, that Russian connection there with these guys has kind of lured some of these players there. And so ultimately, I think, Samsonov hasn't really stolen the number one job, but I think he's played well enough where they can walk away from Holtby because of the money situation. But at the same time, I think, Khudobin knows he could probably go in here. He can probably play 50 games and be that, 1A to, Samsonov's 1B while they still get him matured in this league.
All right. Let's go to the Detroit Red Wings. We'll do a couple more teams here. The Detroit Red Wings have Jonathan Bernier for one more year at $3 million. They, just to kind of give an overview of the rest of it, I mean, really the guys they need to re-sign, Mantha and Bertuzzi, that will get somewhat decent money, especially Mantha. But the rest of the team, I mean, they have $34.6 million in cap space, and they've got a just kind of a wide open slate. Finally, after so many bad contracts, they're coming off the books here with Jonathan Eriksson, finally a UFA. Jimmy Howard gone. Henrik Zetterberg's contract has just one more year left on it. And, of course, he's on LTIR. So technically the Wings could get an extra $6 million in salary relief if they decided to go out and just break the bank and bring in every free agent. And then, just one more year left of Stephen Weiss's buyout. Still paying that guy off. What a great signing that was for Ken Holland. Yeah. Okay, so, what do the Red Wings do from a goaltending perspective? I know you've brought up a couple names already.
Yeah, Cam Talbot, I think, is a guy who is going to have a good opportunity to be a 1A, 1B situation here. I do think the Wings maybe give him a 4-4 type contract. And then on the flip side, you look internally, right? They've got Jonathan Bernier with 1 year left at $3 million. I ultimately think he signs an extension as well. I've liked his game in Detroit. I think he's played very, very well considering the team that's been in front of him. And I think Detroit feels the same way. And ultimately, I do think they maybe give him another 2 or 3 year extension. Just in case, again, maybe they can't go out and get Talbot or they can't sign anybody this year through free agency or trades. And then, of course, they've got Calvin Pickard in the minors with 1 year left. I think he's a very serviceable, number 3 goaltender.
He can't be worse than Howard.
Right. That's the thing. So, if you can go out and get maybe a Cam Talbot, a Bernier, and you have Pickard down there in the minors, I think that's a very good, 1, 2, 3 punch to have on a team that's still in a rebuild.
Is this a year though where I don't think if you're the Red Wings, you want to have another year where you're the bum of the league. Like they've been the butt of every joke for the last little bit here, and they still haven't been able to get the first overall pick. It's not doing them any good. So I think it's time to just they need to go out and do something. I mean, they've got a lot of cap space. They have to bring in somebody because you do have a basement for your salary cap. So they're going to have to go and sign a few guys here to kind of fill out the rest of this roster. And maybe now is a time to go out and make a little bit of a splash. If you can convince somebody that, you've got a team that somebody could, potentially come in and you can build around them, or maybe not build around them, but they can be a pretty good piece of what you're doing. It may not be that time quite yet, but this Red Wings team, I don't think they should be aiming for the bottom again. Like they
No, I absolutely agree. And, from a goaltending perspective, I think even with, a guy like, Talbot and Bernier back there, I don't think you're going to, have goaltenders that will put you at the bottom. Again, if they re-sign Howard, obviously they're saying, okay, we expect to be at the bottom. And I don't think that's what they want to convey when they go out in free agency. And so we know on the back end they're eyeing guys like Torrey Krug and Pietrangelo. But again, maybe they make a larger splash and they go out and they can convince a guy like Taylor Hall, to come in, because they might be willing to give him a little bit more term than other teams. Maybe they say, hey, you can play with, Mantha and Robbie Fabry and Larkin and, get an opportunity. Or maybe they go out and they sign a guy like
that. Doesn't
Michael
sound
Green,
like that much of an opportunity to me. compared to where else he could go.
Well, I mean, he's been rumored to go to Calgary, right? But to be quite honest, I'd much rather play with Larkin than I would
Buffalo.
Play with
He's been talked about going to Buffalo.
Well, yeah.
Too.
If he goes to Buffalo, that wouldn't be too bad. I would be okay with playing with Jack Eichel, I guess. So,
I think if the Red Wings wanted to make a splash, Matt Murray I hear is available. What if the Wings brought in Matt Murray? I think that could be a game changer for them. Oh, did I lose you?
Nope. There we are.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, you cut in and out for a minute.
No, all good. I said, what if the Red Wings? I mean, the Red Wings would definitely have the pieces to bring in a Tristan Jarry or a Matt Murray.
Oh, sure, yeah. There's no doubt about it. I think, when it comes to trading, giving up assets, though, especially for a team at the bottom, they're going to be very, very cautious what they give up because they want to make sure they get a sure thing. And I like Matt Murray. I think he's still capable of being a number one guy, and he's proven it. But, again, I'm still hesitant, right? And if you're Detroit, who's got some higher end draft picks, and
you're not trading away your first. Definitely
no,
not your
absolutely
first.
not.
But would you give a second round pick for Matt Murray?
Yeah, I would.
I think some other teams might be willing to give a first for Matt Murray, maybe.
Yeah,
not me.
Well, no, I definitely wouldn't for sure. But if you're Detroit, maybe because again, that's going to be a high end second. You could just say like a low first round pick at that point. Maybe that might entice.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 32nd pick in the draft, their second round pick.
Right.
So, all right, let's go to our last team of the day, the Edmonton Oilers, who have Mikko Koskinen for another 2 years and $10 million in cap space, and they might bring back Mike Smith, but they are definitely looking for another option.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they've got about $10.5 million in cap space. I think they would like to spend a bulk of that money up front to find some depth at the forward position and maybe get another defenseman back there in their top four.
And they need to re-sign Andreas Athanasiou, who is, what do you think he's going to want? I mean, he was at, 3.5?
3. I think he's worth 3 right now, yeah. And, for a guy that, potentially – and then he could be also, trade bait too for a team if they want to go out and make a move. For me anyways, I looked at this team. I think, Mike Smith, they're not going to re-sign him because I think they would like to find themselves another goaltender who's capable of being a starter, who at least can give them, a few more years. I think Mike Smith, he's
just a 1 year option, yeah.
And to me, I think, when I still believe that Jake Allen's going to get moved before the season starts. I don't think they're going to go into the regular season with him. And I think they go out and they sign a guy like Mike Smith in Montreal. But my bigger takeaway from all this is when they want to go out and bring in a guy to be like a 1B situation, 1A, I think they go and look at a guy like, that has some familiarity with this franchise, and that's Devin Dubnyk in Minnesota.
Wow, if they're bringing back Devin Dubnyk. I don't know if he'd want to go back.
Well, I mean, you look at a team like Minnesota, right, and they've been just hovering at that 8-9 spot for so long, and I can't say for certain they're on their way up, but in Edmonton, there's at least a glimmer of hope that they're on their way up. And I think if you're Dubnyk, you still have a few years left in you to play some hockey, and you can go to Edmonton, and Minnesota will likely either eat some cap or buy him out, so you can get Dubnyk for relatively next to nothing.
I don't think Minnesota's going to buy him out.
Well,
1 year left on his deal.
You could, but ultimately, I think if you can get a 6th or 7th round pick for a guy like Dubnyk to just move some cap space, I think they would be willing to maybe eat half that contract, and then you can go and sign a guy like Dubnyk for a couple $1 million, see if he's still got anything left in the tank, and then if he does, you can talk extension at that point for maybe another 2-3 years after that.
Yeah, I would think that Ken Holland's going to want to go with a sure thing, and the sure thing to me is bringing in Thomas Greiss.
Okay.
He is the best option for this Oilers team. I think in terms of what you could sign him for, I think you probably can bring him in for $4 million. You can sign him to a 4-year deal, and I mean, then you're pretty set. I think you feel pretty comfortable having Greiss in there for a few years at that point, and maybe that 4th year is just kind of the cost of doing business, and then you have to figure out what to do with him for that 4th year. But he's always been consistent. Yes, he plays for a very good defensive Islanders team, but I think he could come into this Oilers team and make a difference. And I don't think that Koskinen is necessarily, he's not awful by any means. I think if he's just playing, in 38 games, he played basically slightly above league average for save percentage. So he played well. So I don't think that you're feeling bad if you need to have him play half the games in the regular season. And if you had Thomas Greiss playing the other half, I think you're in a pretty good position.
Yeah, my only concern with a guy like Greiss, if you're looking at him to be a potential 1A anywhere, I look at, is our system similar to the Islanders? And I think Minnesota's not playing a defensive first type system. I think they would like to,
Edmonton.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Edmonton. Yeah, they're not playing a defensive, type game first. They're looking to, move the puck up, skate fast, go hard, with those forwards and try to outscore you. When you look at Greiss's numbers before Trotz came in, they were mediocre. Obviously he had the terrible year right before, before Trotz got there. And then, that defensive system shows up and all of a sudden his numbers go up. And I don't think that's any coincidence. So if you got a team that plays a different type of system, are you going to get those similar numbers? And to me, I don't know if Edmonton, especially if I'm looking at, 2 different 34-year-old goaltenders, I like Dubnyk a little bit better because he's shown he could be in front of a team that doesn't play as well defensively and still put up good numbers, whereas Greiss maybe hasn't shown that as well.
Sure, but you have to give something up to get Dubnyk.
Sure, absolutely.
And maybe not that much, but something.
Yeah.
The other thought too, Braden Holtby. I know the Oilers want to spend money up front, but Braden Holtby, if you can, I don't know how much he's going to sign for. I don't think no team's going to be willing to throw huge money at Braden Holtby. I don't think he might need to sign a 1-year deal. If you look at his regular seasons the last 3 years, he's been an under average goalie.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're willing to pay him that much. He's just name recognition. Maybe $5 million.
I don't even think, to be quite well. So to me, the bigger question is term, right? What are you going to give Holtby
and it's why I think he needs to go sign a 1-year show me kind of deal. Let's see what you're made of.
Yeah, and I think when you look at Robin Lehner, right, that supposed 5-year, $5 million contract, if you look at a guy who's been stellar for the last couple of years, no matter where he's been.
Yeah, how are you going to give Braden Holtby more than that?
How are you going to give him more money than Vegas is willing to give Robin Lehner? Now I understand maybe Leonard's willing to take, shave $1 million off of that to say, hey, I want, a little bit more term on the back end.
Well, and he wants to play for a good team, right?
Exactly. And that's the other thing too. So, maybe you can make the argument that Holtby can get close to $5 million, but I'm not paying him a dollar more than that $5 million.
Yeah. I don't even know if I'm paying him $5 million. I really don't know. I think he's going to need to go into a place and he's going to if he wants to have the long deal, he's going to need to take a short one and go prove it. But he may just sign like a 3-year deal and take what he can get.
And especially when you've got a lot of teams that are moving goaltenders around, the market is saturated, and a lot of these teams are having, smaller internal caps now. So, he might find that there's not a lot of suitors that are going to give him a ton of money.
Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, he's made $35 million in his career, and $6 million the last 5 years. So I think that he can afford to take a little bit of a hit, but you got to think 2 years ago, this guy was thinking he was going to get Carey Price money coming out of his free agency, and now he's not even going to be half that. There may be a team desperate enough to think, hey, we can bring him back and get him to that superstar level again. But he also does play in front of a team that is a little more loose with the puck. So if he goes and plays for a more defensive team, maybe he has a shot at having a little bit better numbers. But yeah, that'll be an interesting development to see where he goes. And Edmonton would be a team that could give him some term and maybe take a chance on him, because he'll be good. It just depends on, is he going to be great, and what kind of numbers is he willing to take, and is he willing to go to Edmonton? That's the problem. Edmonton's maybe the hardest free agent team to determine, because you truly have to find someone willing to live in Edmonton for 6 or 7 months out of the year in the coldest time of the year. So, I mean, it's a real thing. I mean, I guess it depends on how well you think this team is going to do compared to, maybe I can go and sign in like a warm weather city and just enjoy my life more.
Right. Go play 1B, hockey with Dallas, right?
Yep. Exactly. So, all right. Well, that's the first little bit of teams. We've been going for a little while, so we'll take a pause. We'll come back to doing more goaltenders in our next show for free agency. We'll of course keep an eye on everything happening in the conference finals, and as trades begin to happen. Actually, a trade did just happen with the Minnesota Wild and the Pittsburgh Penguins, with Nick Bjugstad going to Minnesota. So Pittsburgh clearing out a little bit of cap space, and we'll hit on that a little bit more as we move to the Penguins with their goalie situation as well. So you can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.